All right, we will go ahead and get started with our second presenter this morning. So just a couple quick housekeeping things again before we get started. On the slide up here and on your agenda, at the very bottom in the purple box and on your agenda, you see a link to a tinyurl.com/HAEATIC. I want to draw your attention to that. We have been recording these over the last many years. And if you go to that website, one of the tabs at the top is going to be TIC archived resources. We have a YouTube channel that has all of the presentations over the last year recorded. So if you have staff in your building that you would like to see some of the sessions or things that have been shared today, it's a great way if they're unable to come that they can see them and not have to get subs and they can still participate and see some of the information that's been shared. So it's on your agenda as well, but this tinyurl.com/HAEATIC will get you to the website, and at the top you'll find a spot that says Archived Resources. So please take advantage of that. They're getting a lot more views this year, and we want teachers to take advantage of that as they can. Also, we just wanted to mention that all the student examples that have been shown today, there has been permission given for those to be recorded and shared with you today, so that's been taken care of, just if there's any questions about that. And then finally, if you didn't get an iPad to play with, if you don't have one, there are some in the back cart underneath the clock. Feel free to go get one now. We have loaded most of the apps that are going to be talked about during this presentation and the next one, at least the ones that are free or that we could get loaded. So we know some people like to play with them and follow along as they're being shared, and then also during the breaks. So we will move on to our second presenter. This is Sandi Ellis from Dallas Center Grimes. She is a teacher librarian at the elementary level and also the middle school level, and she has some things to share with you today for the 3rd through 5th grade level. So please give a warm welcome to Sandi Ellis.
Thank you. Thank you, Travis. Like he said, I am a K-7 teacher librarian, and I'll be talking today about how my students respond to reading in my 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade classes. And we do that against the lens of the universal constructs. And so that's what I'll focus my comments on today. Just a little bit about me. I am currently at 2 buildings. We're on a 6-day rotation, and so I spend 1 full day in an elementary setting and then the next full day in the middle school. And prior to being a librarian, I was nearly a 20-year 8th grade language arts teacher. So I bring a perspective to the library that some librarians don't bring. The years of teaching reading response with 8th grade, I think, has really helped me come up with some different ways that kids can respond to reading. And I try to put some technology behind that. Like you heard Mrs. Carlson say, it tends to engage them a little bit more. All of my contact information is on there, and you know how to find me. The universal constructs are part of the Iowa Core. And it's only been in the last couple years that I've been introduced to them and have started thinking about how I can use them in my classroom. In both of the buildings where I work, I sit on a technology team. And so we've been spending a lot of time talking about those universal constructs. And like I'm sure you're aware, when you look at the official document, there's a lot of teacher speak, and maybe not even teacher speak. It's a lot of political speak. And we looked at those constructs and we kind of weren't exactly sure what they said. So we spent a lot of time, especially in my elementary technology team, talking about what do those mean to us and for our students, and how can we then take those constructs and apply them to our work. Even though there are 6 of them, we usually only talk about the 4 C's, and those are they're at the top of the graphic. We like to think of them as ways that you can frame the kids' work regardless of the subject that you teach or the content area that you're working in that day. And that's kind of nice, especially as someone who's not a traditional classroom teacher. You know, when we talk about math or we talk about literacy, I, as the librarian, can usually find something to connect with the literacy angle, but my friends that teach PE and my friends who teach music and guidance, sometimes they look at some of our our requirements and wonder how can they put that square peg into a round hole. And we feel like the universal constructs help us figure out ways to do that. So when we talk today, or when I talk today, I'm going to focus my comments on critical thinking and communication, creativity, and collaboration. And the question for me became, how do I frame all of my reading response activities that I do with my students using the universal constructs? I mean, we can sit around in library and talk about how great the book was. I mean, that's good too. I like that. The kids like that. But library needs to be meaningful if we want to keep it. And as the teacher librarian, I want to keep it. So we're always looking at how we can put our lessons against core standards and the constructs to make sure that the work we're doing is meaningful. Let me explain just a little bit about my schedule in the elementary building before we look at those constructs. In the building where I work, I have 6 classes each day that I am there, and it's a K-5 building. And so over the course of those 3 days, I'll see all sections of kids, and we're on a fixed schedule. So there isn't a lot of time for flexibility where even though it's not the 3rd grader's day to come in, can we come into the library and use it? We don't currently have that model. We do have several carts of devices. We've got 3 iPad carts with about 28 or 30 devices on them, I think. I do tend to sign up for the iPads more than I sign up for the laptops. We do have 2 laptop carts, and while I have used them, I prefer to use the iPads with the kids. It's easier for them. We've got a pretty decent system where they can share things with me, and as of now, it's easy for me to retrieve things that they have worked on those devices. So that's a little bit about how we're set up. A little bit like Kendra, I tend to hog one of those carts. I'm the person who creates the sign-up calendar, and if I'm creating the new calendar, I'll just put my name in the calendar while I'm doing that. You know, I guess that's the perk of being the person in charge of the calendar. So if you aren't in charge of those calendars, you should be. But I haven't ever run into an issue where availability has been a concern. And so I recognize that that's unusual and not everyone is in that situation. So depending on how your availability is set up, you may or may not find access like I do. So in terms of critical thinking, the elementary team of technology folks that I work with, we tried to come up with shorter and more simple language for us to think about what the constructs mean to us. And so when we looked at critical thinking, we decided as a team that for us, critical thinking for the students meant that they're trying to answer questions or solve problems without obvious solutions. And so they're going to have to analyze information, they're going to have to access the information in the first place. And we didn't feel like they would be able to solve those problems or answer those questions if they weren't also interpreting, examining lots of pieces of information, and evaluating what they were looking at. And so against that backdrop, when I switch into library land and have kids work on different kinds of responses for me, one of the ways I was able to address critical thinking with the kids was to use the app Popplet. Do any of you already use this app? I love this app. It has so many applications across all content areas. And I've used it with kids as young as 1st and 2nd grade, and it's very user-friendly. There are a few, you know, like any app, we all kind of get caught up in, well, what else can it do? And you start changing the background and all these other things. There's some of that the kids get into, but for the most part, it's really pretty straightforward. It's a web app, and In the library, when we were talking about poetry, I used this to address critical thinking when we were talking about personification. Our third, fourth, and fifth graders get a little bit of poetry, and we're just starting to talk about some figurative language sorts of things. This is where my English background comes in really handy. So when we talked about personification, I had seen a lesson online where teachers were using children's picture books. Personification is when you give non-human things human characteristics, and so that happens all the time in picture books. So what I asked students to do was to choose a picture book. I pulled about 15 or 20 that I knew had examples in it, and then they had to look through the books, find the examples of personification, and I asked them to photograph it using the app. You can take pictures through Popplet. They had to put the picture into a popple, which is one of the bubbles, and then they had to explain why it was personification. And so for me, this was something that I could hit the poetry objective, but it was a way for me to also get kids thinking on their own. I did have them do this in partner groups. Sometimes, depending on what I'm asking them to do and the time that we have, they'll work in pairs. I only see them for 40 minutes at a time, and 10 of those minutes are checkout. So I've got about a 30-minute time to get everything taken care of. And this was something that I could do in one particular lesson. We'd spent some time talking about personification prior to that, and so the next time they came to library, this was the activity that day. I have also used Popplet to talk about main idea and detail, to talk about cause and effect, to talk about a character where you identify a trait and pull from the text the evidence that supports the character acting in that way. There are lots and lots of different applications for Popplet that I think are pretty easy to put into your classrooms. What I would like to do is give you a little bit of time just to talk maybe in table groups about how you have maybe used Popplet, or how you might think you could use Popplet in your classroom. And so that's why you've got iPads at your tables. If you don't already have Popplet loaded, you can take a look at it, play around with it a little bit, see how that might work for you. We'll go, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll talk more about the next set of slides. Sounds like some of you have found some great ways to maybe use Popplet, and others of you have maybe discovered it for the first time today, so that's exciting. It's one of my favorites. I use it quite a bit. I have an anchor chart that I use that has the same set of directions on it. I got tired of always repeating it. I thought, well, this is crazy. If I'm using the app that many times, I need to just put it on a piece of paper and save it. I even laminated it, because that's what we do, you know, in the elementary building. We laminate everything. The other example that I have for critical thinking is using the app Sketch. And I hesitated to put this in because Sketch itself is no longer available. Wah, wah, wah. If you have it on your device, keep it. It still works. Unfortunately, though, they chose not to continue to make it available. Sketch is an annotating kind of app. So you can import a picture, or you can take a picture using the app, and then you can write and draw on top of that picture. So I'm sure there are other apps similar to it. I just haven't taken the time to find those, and if anybody knows of one, please share later. When I used Sketch with my students, it was during our read-alouds. I take time every year to read one of the state award books to my 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. And in talking with classroom teachers, they let me know about the different reading comprehension strategies that they're using in their classrooms. And so I try to connect each time we do a read-aloud. I try to connect the work to one of those strategies. So we're talking about character traits, questioning, we're talking about main idea, summarizing, all of those things in one of those first core standards. It's a big, long one. It's got, I think, 7 different strategies that they recommend to use. In this case, my students took a picture of the read aloud book, and then I provided to them some open-ended Bloom's taxonomy questions. And I really, you know, as the librarian, you know, you're all about teaching them how to use good search terms, and then I go to Google and I say, what are some Bloom's taxonomy? Yeah, so the open-ended questions that I gave them came from a list similar to this. I gave them maybe 6 or 8 to choose from, and I asked them to respond in their partner groups to at least 2 of them. So I would see the book that they had been listening to, along with their responses to the questions that they chose. And so that was another way that I was able to have the kids do some critical thinking, questions that don't have one pat answer that they can just regurgitate back to me. Any questions about critical thinking examples or some that you would like to share from your own work before we go on?
I'll jump in, and a replacement for Sketch that
Yes.
I have just started exploring. It's called Pinpoint, all one word, and P-I-N-P-O-I-N-T, like pinpoint. It's by a company called Lickability. I've not yet got all the information about age levels, but it looks very similar to Sketch, so it's one that you could explore and look into.
I know that my 5th grade teachers that I work with really liked Sketch and used it a lot with science, and would have kids take pictures of things happening in their science lessons, and then the kids would explain what was happening in the picture. And I know a couple teachers in particular were kind of upset when Sketch announced that they were no longer going to be available. But if you do have it on your device, it won't go away just because the app doesn't exist anymore. You just have to be careful that you don't accidentally delete it. The next universal construct that I'll take a look at with you today is complex communication. And this one was one we didn't necessarily struggle with a whole lot as a technology team. We understood that we were looking at verbal communication, written communication, but we also thought that we needed to include visual and nonverbal communication as well. And we really spent some time talking about this second bullet point, that kids really need to understand who their audience is and what the purpose of the communication is. When Kendra was talking about her mystery Skypes, there are several of us in the building who are trying to do more with Google Hangout and Skyping. And that's something that we have to talk about with the kids a lot. The purpose of a Google Hangout is not to see yourself on TV. Oh my goodness. And for a lot of my younger kids, that's all they can focus on. We did World Read Aloud Day, and it was more like World Look at Me on the Big Screen Day. So when we talk about, at least when I talk about Google Hangouts with the kids, or we're going to Skype with this class today, that's a lot of my focus, is why are we doing this, and what is the purpose of our communication. And when my 5th graders Skype with 2nd graders, we also have to talk a lot about how we communicate with them, and just the age difference, that age gap makes a difference sometimes with my students. Like I said, the easiest examples that I could find for this were the Google Hangouts and the Skyping that I've done. There are so many opportunities. We did not do a mystery Skype in the sense that we were trying to determine our location. We did a mystery Skype, and kids in both the 2nd grade classroom and my 5th grade classroom worked in small groups, and they determined a book character. And then my group of kids came to the screen, another group came from the other class, and you ask questions to determine the mystery book character. And that was a way that I could make a mystery Skype work in the library without having to deal with geography. I could have, but it made more sense to do book book-related things. There are so many different ways to learn about them. If you're in a, if you go to Google+, there are Google Hangout communities that you can follow. I inadvertently learned of one where Zoo Atlanta, who housed Ivan from the book The One and Only Ivan, they were doing a Google Hangout several years ago when the book was named the Newbery winner. And so the picture on the left is a 5th grade class. That's the first Google Hangout I ever did. I didn't know anything about it. I signed up for it because I thought this will be awesome. They're gonna talk about Ivan. And then I had no idea how to do it, so I had to quick learn. And so the people that spoke with us were Ivan's handlers for the 15 years that he was there. And the kids could ask questions via Twitter or live in the Hangout. So the kids were throwing these questions at me, and I got on Twitter and I typed in a question really quickly, and they chose our question to answer, which we all were like, oh, that's our question. It was awesome. If you haven't done one, it is just the neatest experience. I've got plans to do one again in April. It kind of comes down to you know people who know people. And so I know another librarian whose niece is an animal coordinator at Animal Kingdom in Disney World. So when my 1st graders get ready to do some animal research, we're going to Google Hangout with someone there in the Animal Kingdom. So if you have not yet done one, I would highly, highly encourage it. All kinds of opportunities. We connect with kids in our own district. I'm in one town. The other elementaries are in a different town. We connect that way. We've connected just around the state. There are other librarians that I can Google Hangout or Skype with. And then nationally, I've broken into the national arena. We're going national with our Google Hangouts. I also have kids with complex communication use QR codes. And a lot of times it's how I'm communicating with them, but then they have to figure out how to communicate with each other. This digital communication with the QR code piece. And then what are they going to do with that information once they have it? How do they problem solve together when I give them what they need on their QR code? I've used them a lot with all grades, K-5. I would highly recommend them, especially with your youngest of students who cannot type. That's agony, giving a 1st grader a web address to type in. If you can just give them a device that they can just hold, and even not all that steadily, hold over a QR code and it takes them to the link, that's the better option than spend, when I only have 30 minutes, I can't go around to 27 kids and type in a web address. Highly recommend the QR code. Do any of you already use QR codes? Do you use them in similar ways? Yeah. I think do you know, Travis, did I give QR code links on anything? Is there one? Oh, okay. Right, and there's one there too. But if you just Google QR code generator, you'll be able to create your own QR codes. Many of them are free. And then I just screenshot it from my computer and put it into whatever document I want to hand out to my students. So I would highly recommend. Why don't you go ahead, talk at your tables about some complex communication things, maybe inspire one another to try a Google Hangout if you have not yet, or maybe how you have done some Skyping things. And then we'll come back and talk about creativity. We, again, on my technology team, talked about how these creativity moments are asking students to combine their curiosity with some innovation. And this was where Genius Hour or Passion Time might come into play a lot. It sounds like Kendra gives the kids a lot of time to figure out what kinds of presentation tools they want to use. And that's kind of the approach that I take as well in the library. They have a lot of knowledge about different apps and things that they can use. And so I kind of just turn them loose and let them choose at that point what they want to use as a tool. I try to give kids those opportunities where we can kind of foster their creativity. My class is not a graded class. And I understand that I have some flexibility in library that a traditional classroom teacher just doesn't have. I don't have that every single day we do math from 9 to 10 and we do this from here to here and then you go off to a special and I plan furiously. I can take some time in my schedule. I have that wiggle room that if it takes another cycle or two for us to finish a project, I can do that. So I understand that my perspective is maybe a little bit different than a traditional classroom teacher's time. Their time is a little more structured than mine maybe. Lots of creativity examples. I had to pick and choose which ones to include. My 4th and 5th graders all do different research activities. And the students all choose their own topics. They have to find information from at least 2 different sources. And so I direct them to some AEA databases. I direct them to websites like Wonderopolis. If you've not been to Wonderopolis, write it down. It's the word wonder and then opolis, just like it sounds. It is fantastic. They have a wonder of the day that is a question that usually is kid submitted. It's wonderful. They usually have some vocab, some videos, maybe a game or two. They have an article. The kids love it. I love it. It's readable. I highly recommend it. I send kids to Wonderopolis during this project. We sometimes use Tween Tribune, although you have to be a little selective. Sometimes the articles, the reading level of the articles is sometimes too high for some of my more less proficient readers. So once kids gather all of their research, they then put it into some kind of presentation, and this is where their creativity comes out. Last year I gave them the options. I wanted to do some kind of app smash. I had heard about them, but I hadn't ever tried one. So my 4th and 5th graders last year were the guinea pigs, and I said, you can use Popplet, you can use some of these other apps here like Write About This or Educreations. They could use Sketch, any of the things that we had been using throughout the year. They needed to put their information into one of those apps, and then we took that information and put it all into an app called Shadow Puppet, which is the example that we will see. My friend Megan wanted to pick elephants for her topic, and so this is what she created after taking her notes and putting them into a presentation. This app is called Shadow Puppet, and then this was Write About This. There's an example of Popplet. Shadow Puppet allows them to import all of these and then put music behind it. That's an example of a screenshot from Sketch. Yes, it's free. I only ever use free. My mama raised me well. I only ever use free apps. Occasionally, I will buy something. We do have a very limited library budget, but I'm pretty selective on what I spend my money on. And I'm too cheap to buy something that has to go on every single iPad. If I can find something that will do it for free, that's what I want to use. I save my money for the really cool Mo Willems apps. This year, the kids are using the same approach, but this year we're using just one app. It's called Show Me, and it works a lot like Educreations. If you had been an Educreations user, I am not much of an Educreations fan right now because they've limited the number of projects you can create. Right now, every one of my 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders is working in Show Me, and so I might have 10 on one device, and they haven't limited the number of Show Me's that I can create. So that's the one that I prefer these days. Another example of creativity, I'd be a pretty lame librarian if we didn't talk about books at some point. this started out as a filler lesson, and then it became one of my favorite lessons. I needed something, you know, when you come back from a winter break or some kind of break, your schedule is off, or because of a snow day, your schedule is off. I needed something to fill a day. And so I wanted kids to do a book recommendation of some kind, and I wanted them to do it using the iPad. And I had never used either of these apps. One is called ChatterPix, that's the one in black and white, and the other one is called Telegami. I watched the tutorial on Telegami. I told my kids to watch the tutorial. I showed them a ChatterPix example, and then I handed out the devices, and I said, okay, finish it up by the time we start checkout. And they were awesome. They were so good. I gave kids a choice. I just wanted them to recommend a book that they loved. It could be a children's book. It could be a book that you had read, a teacher had read to you. Didn't matter. I just wanted book recommendations. And so ChatterPix is the one here that has 8 keys. ChatterPix allows you to take a photograph within the app, and then you draw a line somewhere on the picture. You record what you want to say, and then that line becomes a talking mouth. It's fantastic. And so a lot of the kids took it upon themselves to find the best book cover ever. They all were looking for books with faces, but some of them found really creative ways to use book covers that didn't have a face and something else had a talking mouth, and those were equally funny. We'll play the one here for 8 keys a little bit so you can see what those look like.
This book is a really good book because I think
Isn't that awesome?
it has great meaning to it and is very good because
You can
it
redraw
really
the
kind of
mouth
touches
too.
your
If you
heart
screw it
with
up the
what
first time, you can just
happens
go back in and draw
goes
another
on
one.
with her life in school and at home and with her grandparents.
I love everything about that
and
app.
she has
I
to
love
try
it.
to find keys that show her really cool things.
It's
And
also
it's just
very,
really amazing. You should read this book.
It's user-friendly for my students who are special needs. That's an app that they can use really easily. There's no writing. All I need you to do is talk. Tell me why you like a book. And so I could ask prompting questions kind of off screen, and the kid could just tell me about the book. And so I like using that one with, again, with all age groups and everybody. I mean, you guys were laughing. It's funny every time. Everybody likes this app. There are also little hats and filters and things that you can put on the picture as well. That got a little distracting, but for kids who had finished the task, I don't mind. You go ahead, put some party hats on your book cover. Telegami is one that creates for students. I think this is called their Gami. And it was not as user-friendly as ChatterPix, but I did have a pretty even split of kids, 3rd through 5th grade, choose one over the other. And again, she took the picture of her book, she added her Gami, she pressed record, and then the Gami tells us why we should all be reading this book.
Hi, I'm Brianne, and my favorite book right now is called Regarding the Fountain. It takes place in a school called Dry Creek Middle School, and a fountain breaks. Oh no, someone has to fix it, and someone does. But instead of making a regular drinking fountain, they make a huge, wonderful fountain with many awesome features. Find out what those features are, and hope you have fun reading the book. Bye.
And like I said, I had not ever used that app. I had heard about it, and so I asked, I kind of asked around and figured out, well, okay, this will probably work. I watched the tutorial, and that's what I told the kids to do. Just watch the tutorial. And they're fearless. They'll try that, and then they'll figure out what else the tutorial doesn't include. So I would highly recommend both, and this would be, because you can import any photo that you want into it, take the photo within, this would be applicable all over the place in lots of different content areas. I do have one more example of creativity before we talk about maybe how we can use several of these in our rooms. My 5th grade teachers asked me to work with small groups of students during our win time. These were students who were above proficient in their reading scores. And so I had very small groups. We did do these on computers. We used Powtoon to create book trailers. And so I gave the students like a list of 5 things I wanted them to definitely include, and then how you included those things was all up to them. This is another one of those things I had never used before. But again, I had heard about it. I'd seen things mentioned on Twitter about it. So I thought, okay, let's just see what it can do. There's a great tutorial on YouTube that I continue to use. Even though the look of Powtoon has changed, the tutorial is still accurate in terms of what it asks kids to do. We usually play it for a little bit, and then we pause the tutorial and we play around, and then we watch a little bit more, and then we play around. And the kids were able to put these together all on their own without really much guidance from me. Oops. You can choose from different templates. And so I think this particular template is called Picto. I'm sorry, not a template. It's a blank template, but the style of the characters and the writing that she's choosing is called Picto. And there are lots of different styles. The music you can import. Again, I only ever use the free version, and there are lots and lots of options just with the free version, but you could, if you wanted to, upgrade, and then that would make many more options available to you. What I liked about Powtoon, what I like about Chatterpix, Telegami, I can upload those to YouTube. And so because we've got Google accounts through my district, I've got a YouTube channel. And the kids always think that's awesome. You have a YouTube channel. Yeah, I do. But it makes uploading their projects really simple. And that's another way that I'm able to kind of house/hoard the kids' work from year to year and have examples to show other classes if I need them. Let's take just a little bit of time. I know, am I done at 10:35? 25. 20.
But
okay.
we can go to 10:25. You have a little bit
Okay.
extra time for a break this time. So
Can we plow ahead to the last of the 4 C's? Okay. The last one was collaboration. And we talked about in our team that it's not just collaborating with the people next to you or in your table groups in your seating chart. We want them to be able to communicate and collaborate across networks. So when we think about, go back to those Google Hangouts, or we go back to other ways that we're asking students to share either on Google Drive or however, blogging, whatever we're asking them to do, how are they sharing beyond our 4 walls, our classroom walls? And then in doing so, everyone wins, everyone benefits in those cases. So again, TodaysMeet was something that Kendra had mentioned. I'd seen it on one of her slides. TodaysMeet is a back channel. It's kind of like Twitter Lite. It lets students participate and comment electronically. You can set it up for a particular duration. And so during a read aloud, I was asking kids to make connections. So they had to post a connection and comment on others' connections to text. This could be done as well on a Google Doc. I tried setting that up this year. I think I like TodaysMeet a little better. Kids already use Google a lot, and so whenever I can show them something different, I think that helps. The monitoring of this is a little problematic for me because I'm trying to do the read aloud and see what they're typing at the same time and who's typing it and is that appropriate and oh, I need to keep reading. That just creates opportunities to talk about digital citizenship. I do like it. I think had I thought about it a little more up front, I would have talked to the classroom teacher and maybe kept the TodaysMeet open a little longer so that when they were back in their classrooms, they could continue to comment and maybe relate what we were doing in library to something that they were reading in their classroom. But I do like it. It's pretty user-friendly, and it's just another way that I can get kids to collaborate with one another. And of course, Google Hangouts. The picture on the right is a hangout I did with another librarian in Mason City, and we read a book together, and then in partner groups in each of our classroom, kids collaborated on creating a Google Draw document for us. I liked it. It was a whole bunch of setup up front. She and I have talked about doing something similar again. We might go back to typing instead of drawing. The kids got caught up in the drawing part of it and not the thinking part of it and what we were asking them to really do with that assignment. When we do Google Hangouts, this is the picture of our book character hangout. The kids then all have activities on their different ends to do, and then we use good old snail mail and send our work to each other that way. And so we're building relationships with a second grade class. Conveniently, there's a sibling pair in that second grade and fifth grade. She's a little annoyed that she has to send mail to her brother, but I made sure she was in a different group. But it's fun for the kids, and it's a way to get them to think about how they can work together when they aren't sitting right next to each other all the time, and that it's possible to do that. My kids also collaborate with QR codes. I have an introductory scavenger hunt activity at the beginning of the year, and so they've got to figure out things together. They have to figure out what clue they're getting on the QR code. They have to talk to each other. They have to problem solve a few things. Sometimes they get to a station that another group is there, and so they end up working together that way as well. So a little bit of trickery in there.
I have a question about your Google Hangouts. I know the question came up earlier. Where do you find, I know you said from Marshalltown, is it just someone you know?
Yeah, it was Mason City. That particular librarian and I had connected on Twitter, and then we met at our state conference, and we started making arrangements. We had our contact information. Library schedule is very different from classroom schedule. I can't just drop everything and do a Google Hangout. I mean, I have first grade or third grade at this time, only on this day. I look on the Kate Messner's website with the authors who Skype. I visit the Google Hangout communities on Google Plus every once in a while just to see what's out there. A lot of times it's just with other librarians that I make some connections and then go from there. That is all of it. I'm sorry I went a little bit over, but you can find me. I'm on the social medias, so
All right.
thank you.
Before we wrap up, any questions? We do have a couple minutes we can take for questions, but we've had several throughout. Also, any questions coming online from the people joining us virtually? Nothing? Oh, we have one here. Sorry, right in front of me.
I'd like to hear more about the QR codes, what type of clues you were giving, because I know you can link to websites or to
Yep.
videos or audio files
Yep.
or whatever.
Yep.
And if you have found a QR reader app that you like better than others, because there are just millions of them.
Yes, I'd have to look on my iPad. I don't know which app I'm using right. I'm sure it was a free one. In fact, I know it is because it's got obnoxious advertising and the kids get distracted by it.
You did link to one, and so the one that you sent me is on the presentation. So that I'm
Okay.
assuming that's the one you used.
Yeah,
but
probably.
the one you sent me might be it.
Yep. In my library scavenger hunt, I might have questions about the state award books, and so I might send them to where they're displayed in the library, and I'll have a QR code, and it will ask them what was last year's state award winner. And so when they scan it, it takes them to that book's website or the author's website. I had questions about, we do library centers, and so I had an image of a timer that I linked it to so that they would know how much time they would have in a period to do library centers and checkout. I just question what's Mrs. Ellis's favorite book she read last summer, and it would take them to the book site. Yep, yep. Sometimes a document, a Word doc, or a Google Doc.
All right, any additional questions? All right, one thing before we wrap up along the lines of Skitch, because I know that's been a traumatic event for a lot of people. It won't help you as much as your students as much, but some people I don't know that are aware, all of the main Skitch functions still remain inside the Evernote app, which needs to be used by kids over 13. But if you were using the Skitch app to create things and whatnot, inside of Evernote, if you have an image, there's a little squiggly mark in the top, right? If you click that, all the same Skitch options come up, where you can draw arrows, you can add text and all that stuff. So that does still exist. They've basically just taken the Skitch, what was a separate app, and added it into the Evernote app. Unfortunately, to use the Evernote app, you have to have login, email, all that stuff that requires you to be over 13. So thank you very much for all that great information. We're going to take a 10-minute break till 10:35, but let's give a round of applause to Sandi, and thank you.